Love to get this guy on here. Saul, of course, he's been busy. Had a great show, CHGO Bears. Adam Hoge, he's going to kind of put to rest these rumors that, Cliff Kingsbury, him making his way, Mr. Kingsbury going to the Washingtons would say, Hoge, is he going to get Caleb Williams to DC? But there's one team in between him and that pipe dream, and it's the Chicago Bears. If we could get Adam up here, get some audio. I couldn't hear him there. There he is.
There we go.
All right.
Now I can hear my
Damon,
voice.
wake up. Wake up, Damon.
Everyone's trying to make trades with me today.
Yeah. What's the
I
best
don't
one
have
you've
any
heard?
power. I don't. The DMVR guys were trying to send Patrick Surtain to Chicago.
The
I'm like,
DMVR guys, come on now. Like they live in a constant pipe dream.
They win every offseason, though, too. I mean, they get Russ, 2 years ago. This year, last year, they get Sean Payton.
Yep.
I was talking to Tony Pauline out in Mobile. He said, look, Sean Payton is desperate to get one of these three guys, but it's a near impossibility because what's going on with the first three teams picking this draft, they're all quarterback hungry, and they all want to make a change, including the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I think that's the big. To me, that's the bigger question, more so than does Caleb Williams not want to come to Chicago? We can get into that a little bit.
That's crazy.
I find a lot of that to be nonsense. To me, it's more the fundamental question of what do the Bears want to do going forward? Do they love Caleb Williams and want to go in that direction, or do they have concerns about Caleb Williams to the point that okay, the safer thing to do is to just take a haul from whatever team's going to offer it and try to keep making this thing work with Justin Fields. But there's so many reasons even within that conversation, which we have every single day on CHGO, where it just seems hard to believe that that's what this GM at this point, who did not draft Justin Fields, by the way, is going to do when he can reset the rookie contract. And I think we can all watch Caleb Williams and understand how good he is too. So that's ultimately where I still think this thing heads. We're in Vegas. We talk Vegas odds. I mean, the betting favorite right now has to be that Caleb Williams is a Chicago Bear at the end of April.
What in your opinion, if Caleb Williams was not to go number one to the Bears, what's the best case scenario for the Bears if they don't draft Caleb Williams number one overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best case scenario is just that they end up getting, the same type of trade they got last year, which obviously worked out really well, where they not only added the draft capital that they did that led them to this position where they have the number one pick again, but they also drafted a player in DJ Moore that was,
Yeah.
instantly impactful. Was probably the best player on the entire roster this year. So that's where there's a strong argument if you want to keep Justin Fields. I don't think they would draft a different quarterback. I kind of at least not in the first round. Maybe they like J.J. McCarthy in the second round or something like that. But right now they don't have a second round pick, so that would have to become in the in the trade package that they would get. I find it hard to believe they would move just back one spot and then still end up taking Drake May, moving on from Justin Fields. I feel like the bust factor is a little bit too high there.
So you're saying Marvin Harrison Jr. is probably the guy?
Yeah, I do.
That's what I was trying to get to, folks.
Sorry, guys. I do think that's if they move out of that pick to only number 2 or number 3, my gut right now, not inside information, would be they're sticking with Fields and they're just going to draft a really good. They're going to take the draft haul they got or the trade haul, and then they're going to draft Marvin Harrison Jr.
But you find yourself in a situation, though, possibly that you would have DJ Moore, and then you have Marvin Harrison, and Fields would crap the bed again next year. And then what do? Now you're right back to where you started.
And I think that's why the logical way to break this all down leads me back to Caleb Williams being a Bear, because this trade that they pulled off last year with the Panthers could not have worked out better. And I don't even think when they made it, they thought they would end up with the number 1 pick again. What happened with the Panthers this year, no one really thought they'd be great, but I certainly didn't think they'd be as bad as they were. And even if you think that when you make that trade in March of last year, you don't know that.
Right.
You don't know when you're making that trade. I mean, you can't make that trade be like, oh, well, we're going to get Caleb Williams next year out of this. There's just, you can't do it that way. So same thing applies this year. If you're going to make that trade, what's your quarterback answer next year if it fails, if Justin Fields fails, if it doesn't work out? And there's just no way that the answer to that question brings you the same value that you currently hold with the access to Caleb Williams.
Right. And I think a lot of people felt like that trade, the Carolina Panthers were actually going to be what the Houston Texans were this year, right? Like that it was going to be Bryce Young elevating that roster, and like probably still a first-round pick, but it wasn't going to be top 10, top 5, number 1 overall. But Ryan Poles is shown to be pretty bold, right? Like his testicular fortitude, it's pretty high, right? But to pass on a guy like Caleb Williams, to already pass on a guy like C.J. Stroud the previous year that proved to elevate what Houston's doing, like he better know pretty damn well what he's doing. Like it's just like, as you said, all signs point back to Caleb as the safest play moving forward.
Yeah. And I don't know that I thought that a couple months ago, to be honest with you. I sort of felt like running things back with Justin was safer because at that point, USC was kind of struggling and there was these questions about Caleb Williams, and this is really before I started digging into this stuff more. And honestly, watching more of the tape, I've watched so many of his games now just in the last couple months, and you just can't help but watch him be like, this guy's unbelievable. He's unbelievable. And then you do the digging, and I had a big story come out this morning, on talking to some of the people who have coached him, who have played with him. No one really has a bad thing to say about him. I think a lot of this stuff is smoke. And just like...
Do you know who that sounds like? Kyler Murray.
Yeah, exactly like Kyler.
Yeah.
Exactly like
really
Kyler.
Does. Like the red flags that popped up around Kyler, and like we cover him and we talk to people that are close to him or coached him. Like he's as competitive as he loves ball. Yeah. And then you see the things from Caleb, like Carl Williams saying he would want some sort of ownership stake. He's telling that to GQ and. I want to go home and watch Netflix with my dog and all that. It's like, does he love ball or does he care? He's crying in the stands. It's like, but still, when you turn on the tape, it's electric. And it's like, if people like Justin Fields, they're going to love Caleb Williams.
The other thing I would say about Caleb, too, is that he's extremely competitive. Like, again, I was at Pac-12 Media Day, interviewed him, and I'm watching him go against another it was Penix, and they were playing pickleball. And Caleb was losing, and he was like, fuck that. You know what I mean? He turned it on and tried to beat him. Like, he's uber competitive.
Wait, did he?
And I think sometimes people look at him like when he goes into the stands and he's crying because they lost that game, right? Like, some people look at that and they're like, oh, I can't believe he's doing that. That's kind of soft. I'm like, that dude wants to win so bad that he's emotional about it. I'm okay with that. And so I don't think that's something to really scoff off at.
Yeah, and a couple things to that, Nicholas Moriano was down at the Senior Bowl last week with you, Bo, and he talked to the USC running back, Marshawn Lloyd, right, is his name. Similar story, what you just brought up with pickleball. He was like, this guy doesn't want to lose anything. We had a dodgeball match, and Caleb was losing, and he was like flipping out over it. He does not want to lose at anything. And then to that point, in some of the digging I did for the story that came out this morning, the context of that game where he's crying post-game matters because he's very goal-oriented and his family's very goal-oriented. So, he wanted it when he made the move to USC. The Heisman Trophy was a goal. Got it. But the national championship was the other big goal. And at that point, that Washington game, they were basically, on life support. To have any national championship hopes, but they weren't necessarily eliminated. And that game was the game where it was like, okay, this dream, all this stuff we've been working for years and years and years, it's over. It's not happening. And then he goes over and he hugs his mom. And he said later that week in an interview he did with the USC reporters that, sometimes the touch of your mother just brings the emotions out of you.
Yeah.
And I think we can all, as human beings, relate to that at some point. So getting that type of context to that specific thing that people are trying to hold against him, I don't see it that way. That being said, if I'm an NFL GM, it's probably a question I'm asking.
Yeah.
At some point along the road, they got to ask these very hard questions. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter at all, but I can't find here's the only thing that's come up that has been a legitimate criticism that I've heard, and that is when things aren't going great in the middle of games, he can kind of shut down on the sidelines and be kind of hard to he'll kind of put up a brick wall and be kind of hard to get through. Yeah. And that's okay. That's a legit.
But isn't that part of the maturation process? And we saw it play out firsthand with Kyler, right? And he would do the same thing. And you're like, oh, his body language sucks on the sidelines. But we've seen that develop, and it's easier to develop that than it is to develop the skill set that he has right now at the quarterback position, because you're seeing that on the opposite side as far as the arm talent with Justin Fields and where he lacks as far as the ability to make the throws, where Caleb can make those. And, sure, Justy's got great sideline demeanor, but he's going to go out there and win you a football game and make the throws necessary. Well, that's going to be harder to teach than maybe Caleb, maybe his body language being a little bit better.
Right, because you're talking about, not necessarily raw talent, but some of the more detailed mechanics that go into stuff that's harder. That's harder to teach. And we've seen with Justin Fields, a lot of the same concerns that we still have about Justin Fields today are the same exact concerns that they had coming out of Ohio State. Whereas, with this other stuff, dude, this is a 21-year-old kid.
Yeah.
We forget that sometimes. These are and they're Caleb Williams is a 21-year-old with this enormous spotlight on him. That just getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the type of thing that changes, as he matures in the NFL and becomes a professional? And that's always – that applies to all draft picks, obviously. But in this case, okay, if his sideline demeanor needs to get a little bit better, that's something that will probably improve as he gets into the NFL.
Yeah, agreed. Listen, just keep your hands off of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Have you even turned on the tape?
For Marvin?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And look, we're in Big Ten country, so, I've seen him turn on.
Our listeners just got at the edge of their seat. What's he going to say about Marvin?
Well, because I went to Wisconsin. I'm a Wisconsin Badger guy, and that was not a fun game to watch this year. This guy's just unbelievable. He's incredibly good. He'll be my top wide receiver this year, no question. Now, that being said, because, the Bears do have the 9th pick, and they need a wide receiver, too.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking about this as well, and there are a ton of Bears fans that, are coming up with all kinds of dream scenarios where, you could trade back and still get Marvin, or there's the wild theories are you could draft Caleb and then move up to somehow get Marvin, too.
With the Patriots?
That?
Yeah, maybe the Patriots don't love Jaden Daniels or May, who was ever there. I mean, they could be in the same spot the Cardinals were last year, where they need to get some assets, future draft capital. It's possible.
Yeah.
But
if that happened, Phoenix will riot.
Yeah.
I
would be Caleb Williams in the stands. If I saw my mom, I would break down. I would just break down in tears.
See, though, I love Roma Odunze, though. I really do. So, in terms of a consolation prize, and here's the problem with that with the Bears, I don't think he's going to last a 9.
No.
I don't think he lasts a 9 either.
I also think that there's an argument to be made that, yes, Marvin Harrison is the clear number 1, but Rome Odunze is not that far behind.
I agree with you.
1,000,000%.
I don't think the gap's that big.
I like Malik. I got Malik between those two, but it's a great class.
I'm not
the top 3. And then, the depth of this, and Nick and I saw this on full display, in the day 2, day 3, the depth at receiver is pretty impressive, but at the same time, that top tier.
It's special.
It is.
The top.
It really is.
It's special at the top, and I hope one of those guys falls to the Bears at number 9.
Do you think they could pick swap maybe with an Atlanta or something, or Las Vegas with Justin Fields?
Possibly. I mean, the Texans kind of set the table for that last year and how they maneuvered around and ended up getting Will Anderson and Stroud at the same time because they had that draft capital. I really do think, though, that Ryan Poles, the Bears general manager, is one of these guys that understands the value of always keeping that draft capital intact a year ahead. So that might be part of his motivation for moving back from 1. And then he realizes Caleb Williams is too good to pass on.
Right.
So the idea of him moving up from 9, I personally find hard to believe. I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I just don't think that. I think he'd be more inclined, if he sticks with Caleb at 1, to end up moving back later, with that 9th pick. Especially if those other wide receivers are all gone. I could see the Bears jumping back.
There's no way they let Jalen Johnson out of their grasp, right?
No chance.
Yeah. Okay.
No chance.
Just bury that, Cardinals fans. Just Bears trying to figure out ways to get up for Marv. Just realize that Jalen Johnson, that dream's not happening.
He'll get tagged. I think that's headed to a classic franchise tag. Maybe a small chance that they work out a deal, but Yeah, I don't see any scenario in which, and they honestly both sides have basically said that publicly.
Good.
But Ryan
That's how it
Poles
should be.
at the end of the season, he's like, "No, we're not letting him out of the building. It's not
That's
happening."
the smart thing to say.
Yeah.
So
A lot of smart things being said by the CHGO Bears this week. Matthew Berry was on with you. Albert Breer. Great interviews. Highly encourage you to check out CHGO on YouTube and wherever you find your podcast, CHGO Bears. Adam, thanks, man.
thanks, guys. I'll do what I can to get Marvin to
Would you?
Arizona. But again, I don't have any control over this.
He's
so.
already liking tweets and stuff like that. So